Welcome to the Not Badger for the week ending February 19th, 2016. Here, thanks to our overworked and underpaid diamond miners and sweatshop workers, we have compiled a collection of funny, interesting, and hopefully useful clips from our most watched shows. Enjoy the spoils of their hard work. In the Raging number 59, Mike and Allison dive into the minds of crazy violent people who think that breaking a coffee cup on a man's face is the best way to sell shoes? Equality?
There's still not equal pay for equal work anywhere in the world.
I've made a terrible mistake.
You know, I don't even want to engage with these arguments anymore. And you know why I don't want to engage with these arguments anymore? Because they have never been held to a standard of scientific rigor. And if they haven't been held to a standard of scientific rigor, they do not describe reality. They can't even have the credibility of being accepted as describing reality. Until feminists actually try to show to the satisfaction of a jury of people who are skeptical about their claims that they have attempted to falsify them and have failed to falsify them, they are not credible.
And it seems most women are not even angry about it.
Being angry over false pretenses is not a good thing. Please stop encouraging people to be angry about a reality that is not so. The anger has its place. Don't get me wrong, anger is for making things fair, for making things right. So to make people angry over something that can never be made right because it's a lie is grossly irresponsible in my opinion, and perhaps even abusive. Psychologically abusive on a ridiculously large scale. For those of you who believe in this pandemic lie, they are using it to sell you shoes. What does that tell you? And for those of you who believe in these shoes, they are using a pandemic lie to sell them to you. What does that tell you? I've looked at this from several angles, and they're all giving me a strong vibe of this is some bullshit.
So let's set a new goal. From now on, equal pay is no longer enough.
That is not new. At all.
Because women need more.
Your slight uptake in honesty regarding the matter is new. Yes, women need more. Women want more. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. Women want more than they have, no matter how much they have. And they'll keep going until they get to the forbidden fruit, and then they'll take that too. Yeah, or they'll get a man to steal it, yeah. Man's greatest failing is he will drive himself into the ground at the expense of everyone else. Woman's greatest failing is she will drive everyone else into the ground at their own expense. These are both elements of human nature that will grow exponentially out of control if left unchecked. Tell me, ladies, or at least advertising moguls behind this commercial, what's bugging you in particular this time? Healthcare? Reproductive rights? Political representation?
Our haircuts are more expensive. Our underwear is ridiculously more expensive.
Are you a toddler? Are you actually a fucking toddler? We've long since reversed past the idea of first world problems. We're now on first year problems. You are grown-ass adults, and you still can't even figure out how to put on pants without help from Big Brother. By the way, if you are wearing expensive underwear just to please the man in your life, might I ask, is he a garbage man? Is he a sewer sanitizer? Is he unemployed? This man of yours, whom you feel the need to impress with expensive lingerie? No, he's a man of expensive tastes, is he? And that's why you always need to look your best. Okay. Who's paying for it, please? Yeah, thought so. It's not poor women doing this kind of complaining. Poor women are extremely resourceful, working class mothers especially. They can find the cheapest way to tie two stones together. And they actually enjoy the challenge a lot of the time. I know I do. Thrift can be jolly exciting. When you get that killer bargain when you were in just the right place at just the right time. It's it's like an epic win at a video game. It's like doing a speed run and getting the run, But this is all a mystery to the people this commercial concerns. This bullshit is of no interest to the poor or even the moderately wealthy. This is rich women complaining about how much their husbands spend on them. How much more their husbands have to spend on their wives than they spend on themselves. And how unfair that is to women.
I really wonder, could we ever do a study into that? How much do men have to pay on average to get laid? How much do men have to pay on average to date? How much do men have to pay on average to marry? How much do men have to pay on average to reproduce relative to women? These are numbers we need. These are numbers we need. Where are they? Where are they? Oh, by the way, why are all of these women like supermodels? Because you know that supermodels make way more. Female supermodels make way more than male supermodels.
In Polecat Cast number 80, we talk about the news of the week, including E3 opening its doors to everyone, how husbands in the West are far more dangerous than Islamic terrorists, I'm not kidding, bringing the boobs back to Playboy, and Marvel Comics going back to telling good fucking stories again.
This is a day that's long since coming. It has been a long time coming, because when this happens, this is like every pseudo game journalist blogger their ass is puckering up so fucking hard right now because they are becoming obsolete. The world is moving on. The world is said very clearly, hey, you know what? You're not that important. Anybody can do your job. There are people on YouTube. There are people like independent games press, people that are up and coming bloggers, what have you, that can do your job. So I love this personally because I left that whole world because I saw all the fucked up shit that was going on behind the scenes, and I saw the fucked up things people were doing and saying behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So this is great. I think it's fucking brilliant. I love it. Well, fucking more power to the people. Power absolutely. To the gamer.
Well, I was just going to say, so, E3, I would imagine that any place where a lot of people gather, usually conventions or these sort of expos and stuff, it's a place where creators, people who create products, go in the hopes of selling their products. And then in the places where it's sort of exclusive to press for whatever the product is, like depending on whether you're into cars or motorcycles or video games, whatever it is. Usually they sell to the people who are going to reach the widest audience that might have the best odds of selling their product. But I think that this is a really, really good move on the part of E3 because when it comes to games, as you were saying, not everyone is an expert. Like they're not necessarily experts. It's so subjective. But the best way to spread the word about something still is probably word of mouth. Just from people just like you, consumers. This is one of the reasons why, and I think that this is sort of like, where we're going back to in terms of a way to, people do their shopping. Because this has been, in a way, you see this on Amazon. If I go shopping for a product on Amazon, I almost always look at the reviews that are just done by regular people who have bought the product before or may know something about it. And that's usually what a lot of people go by with determining it. So, I mean, from a marketing perspective is what I'm saying. This is a good move on the part of E3 and the people who are essentially the salespeople there or whatever, because you just move all around all that shit. No, you don't have to worry about what Jim Sterling is going to say. You don't have to worry about what Movie Bob is going to say. Fuck them. You can just go ahead. Now, and the thing is too, when it comes to games reviews, it's even more particular because, they may have completely different tastes from you. And often these guys do. And I think that people in general are sort of like, well, I don't care if Angry Joe likes it. I don't. So maybe this is the way to go.
I want to point out something about with respect to journalism. When I say organized journalism, I'm talking about the American Press Institute. because obviously being from the U.S., that's going to be my source. I'm sure that there are similar organizations in other nations with similar names. But the American Press Institute defines journalism as an activity. So basically, there is no such thing as an all-the-time journalist. You are engaging in journalism when you do what journalism is, but it doesn't make you a journalist so that you can say, I'm a journalist, when you do something that is not journalism, when you blog and it's not in a journalistic manner. And the Institute defines it as the activity of gathering, assessing, creating, and presenting news and information. And then it goes on to cite the value of the information, which comes from a purpose of providing people with verified information they can use to make better decisions, as the factor which differentiates journalism from other forms of communication. So you can communicate all you want in your blog. You can give editorial opinions, you can lie in your blog, but it's not journalism unless you do what was just described there. And that's something that a lot of people that call themselves journalists completely ignore. Rather than providing like verified, useful information that people can make decisions based on that information and know they've made a decision based on the actual facts, and that what they've decided is going to go the way that it looks like it's going to go because they know the truth about the situation. That a lot of these people are more interested in influencing you one way or another. And you see it not just in games media, it's in the overall mainstream press, the establishment press. And what's happened with E3 has happened with the establishment press as well with respect to American politics. They just had a massive temper tantrum online about Trump calling on smaller news agencies for questions in a press conference. And, they're he's avoiding certain types of questions. Well, no, that's on the journalists. You ask your questions. But calling on news agencies that are not CNN or NBC or Fox or whatever, that's not avoiding anything, because anybody can choose what kind of questions they want to ask. It's simply giving the opportunity to smaller outlets. And these guys have had a monopoly on this type of thing for so long.
Yeah, they've become a gilded class, basically.
Yeah, they feel entitled. They've developed a sense of being gatekeepers of information. And that's probably the worst thing that can happen with media in any area, as if they feel entitled to control what information you get. And that's happened with games media, and that's basically why they were so mad about Gamergate happening, was that they felt entitled to control what information you get. And gamers said, no, you don't have that entitlement. You're not allowed. So it's no wonder they're throwing temper tantrums over this. They've had their toys taken away. They've had their gate taken away. They've been just basically been told, no, we can have what we want. This is information. It's not your prerogative to keep it from people. Spousal murder is not that high up on the list for either sex. You're far more likely to have a heart attack or die from a medical accident than you are by the hands of your spouse. And it's these social justice types try to exaggerate this stuff to make it sound like this grave danger for everybody. And it's an avoidable danger in that if you pick your partner wisely when you get married, you don't face this problem. It's not something that they want to hear. That's victim blaming. Oh no. But, and women are in the unique situation of having their choice to leave facilitated at any moment that they choose to leave. All they have to do is call one of the 24-hour hotlines that you can find online or in the phone book, and often in women's restrooms, just posted at random by people to get out. What they do is they classify some mass shootings as terrorism and some mass shootings as gang violence. And then they make it sound like only white people commit mass shootings. Well, that's not true. And they do the same thing with school shootings. If any shooting takes place on school property, so somebody robs somebody's house and the cops are chasing them and they run onto school property and the cop shoots the runner, that gets classified as a school shooting when they do the stats on school shootings. And that was brought out last year. It's all cooking the books. When they come up with these statements about prevalence of specific types of crime and they start accusing a specific group of people of committing that crime. And by the way, not all gang violence is black either. But in any case, when they do that, and they try to make it look like one group of people is doing it all the time and other groups of people never do, it's all cooking the books. A lot of the stuff that they do makes no sense whatsoever, these social justice types. They'll say these things. Oh, Islam is a religion of peace. These guys over here aren't real Muslims, but you treat them like real Muslims once you capture them and put them in prison. And make up your minds. And they do the same thing with this situation. Oh, guns are violent. Guns are the problem. Whenever violence happens, it's all about guns, except when it's husbands. And then it's the fact that they're men. And the fact that they're husbands. And they can't seem to recognize, like, they have no sense of self-awareness when it comes to self-contradiction. And it's like every other sentence they come out with something like this.
My understanding was that Hefner's daughter took over the business and that she was a big feminist and she was trying to actually take the nudity out of Playboy and make it classier and less objectifying. And the sales probably tanked because now his son is taking over and the boobs are coming back. Coincidence?
Well, it tanked immediately, even on the when they announced it.
Oh yeah.
I forget what the number was. I want to say it was like a 72% subscription cancellation rate or something like that. It was something ridiculous. It's like, oh well, we're taking the boobs out of Playboy and we're going to be a shitty Maxim basically at this point, if that even exists anymore. And people were like, yeah, nope, no thanks, don't care. People don't want to be preached to. They don't want to be beaten over the head with ideology. You can bring diversity and things into stories. You can write a good story. You can have a deft hand and create something that works around a framework of saying like, hey, maybe somebody does need more, representation or whatever. But make it part of the story. Don't turn it into a Bible that you're going to smack people upside the fucking head with. And people, rightfully so, they got tired of it very, very quickly. I sincerely hope, because, as much money as Marvel and Disney are making off the movies, that will not sustain them. At some point, that will go away, and the comics will be there to. They'll have to maintain themselves. It'll be back to like, oh well, something else is in vogue now. Something else is the favorite of the community. So, all the people that we pissed off that supported us for the last 50, 60, however many years have all left. Who do we have for us now? Oh, we have a bunch of feminists that don't buy comics. Oh yeah, wow, that worked out great. No, I mean, I hope they sincerely get away from this nonsense, because it doesn't do anybody any good. Like, it doesn't do anybody good that's trying to create content that maybe does spark change. Because when you do things like Lindy West and her unsolicited opinions on Israel bore shit on the fucking in a Thor book, it's like, seriously, you're not converting anybody. You're not winning friends. All you're doing is pissing people off. So tell stories about diversity, introduce new characters, but don't destroy everything that was there beforehand that laid the foundation for you to be able to do the work that you're doing, just to make your fucking point and wave your fucking flag and saber rattle is what I was trying to say, actually. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this does work out well. I'm hopeful.
You know what it is these progressive social justice types don't understand the difference between storytelling and marketing and proselytizing.
Yep.
And they don't get that you cannot substitute one of those things for other of those things and have the same effect that you would get with the others. And this is like a really basic marketing thing. You want people to buy something, you have to make it attractive to them. You don't dictate what they find attractive. You come up with reasons why, they should find it attractive, but the success will be greater if you make it into something that they already find attractive. That's why no matter how many times they try it in fashion, when they make really ugly clothes, it'll be a trend for a short time, and then it disappears, and it goes back to that which is flattering to the body type of the people that they're marketing it to. It's the same thing in terms of storytelling and other entertainment media. If they want people to buy it, they have to create it in such a way that it's already attractive to the people that they're selling it to. They can't dictate what those people are going to like. And they're going to fail every time they try that, no matter how much they value personally the thing they're trying to sell. You can think you have the greatest thing in the world, and if everybody else doesn't like it, if everybody else doesn't find it attractive and interesting and desirable, you're still not going to get them to give you their money to take it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's very simple.
When people buy the stuff now, a lot of times they're doing it as a form of virtue signaling. Like they say, oh, I'm going to do this in defiance of all these, bigots in comic culture. I'm going to show everyone that I'm different. I'm not like the rest of them. I'm not like the entire culture. And like this entire subculture within comics fans. And I'm going to go buy this book. And the thing is, that's not enough people. And a lot of times they stop once they realize the book is shit.
The interesting thing to note is that the UK is actually sandwiched in between two countries that are frequently attributed with restrictive, oppressive, patriarchal systems that allow beating women. The one was Egypt. The top one was Egypt. Third place is India. So somehow women in these supposedly horribly restrictive, oppressive countries are getting away with this degree of violence against their supposed oppressors. I wonder how that's happening. And it actually, and the story was the website that's sourced for the story on the page is Cairocene, Cairo. It's Cairo or kerosene. I think it's Cairocene.
I think it's Cairocene. It was just misspelled in the.
And it's somebody had a dyslexic moment when they were typing it up. I can sympathize entirely with that. I'm also dyslexic sometimes. But going on with this, this is one of the things that we've been talking about as a group with this women worsting thing. People are only looking at one aspect of this society and then defining the entire society by it. Oh, this is a women enslaved patriarchal. This is the real patriarchy. We should send the feminists over there. No, it is not. And we should not. It is a system that has a lot that needs to be fixed. There's a lot of shit that needs to be fixed in the way that the authoritarian state treats the people in a lot of these areas. But it isn't just directed at women. It's directed at everybody. And if you send feminists over there, you're going to get the same thing that you got in the West, where over there it's guardianship, over here it was coverture. And you had the same kind of problems, although maybe not the same degree, maybe not the same flavor, whatever you want to say. But you had the same situation where feminists fought really hard against a system where men had obligations, and due to those obligations, basically to facilitate those obligations toward women, women had restrictions in order to make those obligations easier to meet. And they demanded that women be released from those restrictions, but they wanted to hold men to their obligations and their restrictions. And that didn't work well. And we ended up in a situation where now women are dissatisfied and men are discriminated against. And when you want to create the same thing in other cultures, then yeah, send feminism there. That'll do it. If you want actual reform, don't try to do it through feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that reform is not needed. It doesn't mean that it is not adversity when a woman alleges rape and she gets stoned for it. It just means that it's also adversity when a man rejects his religion and he gets crucified for it. It's also adversity when you can't even acknowledge abuse. When it happens to a man, he has no recourse other than to sue. And one of the things this article says in the Saudi Gazette is, according to statistics from the Egyptian family court, 66% of wives who abuse and beat their husbands apply for divorce in the family court. Now, if these women were enslaved by their husbands, they wouldn't be able to do that. Now, I'm not saying that this is the same situation as every Islamic country either, but to portray it as a one-dimensional thing, obviously that's not the case. It's quite obviously incorrect. Here you have a situation where these men who are abused cannot prosecute their wives, but the wives can file for divorce, and they wouldn't be doing that if they could not, in filing for divorce, file for such a situation that they would not end up in poverty, that they would not lose everything when they file for divorce. You don't see a lot of men in the United States filing for divorce because they know they're going to get reamed on child support, property division, alimony, and things like that. I imagine that the reason that these women are comfortable filing for divorce is because they're not going to get reamed on property division, on the expense of raising children, and so on. So this is a situation where looking at it as a one-dimensional thing is not productive.
In Honey Badger Classic number 2, we look at feminism's claim that by making men aware of their privilege and oppressive nature, they can show how much they love them.
Now settle down, young'uns, and shake the wax out of your ears. I got a story to tell. Now you might recall those 3 dangerous women I was telling y'all about last time. That ornery quill pusher, Bad News Hannah, who'd made a name for herself, confusticating and discombobulating those no-good lying scoundrels who print what passes for news round here. The girl writes what, that cheroot-smoking, moonshine-guzzling renegade who had a price on her head for aggravating, flustering, and otherwise perturbing the ladies. And Allison, the outlaw who fancied herself a sheriff or some such, who was so out of her mind she thought she was a badger, and who might as well have been one for all the sense she made. It was down at the crossroads over that hill just yonder that their 3 paths first met, and they knew in the marrow of their bones that they all had business in this here town. You see, they'd been tracking, each unbeknownst to the other, a gang went by the name of the Foyer Gals. A meaner, more deadly nest of rattlesnakes you will never come across. Yet they masked their fell thoughts and deeds behind the veil of the righteous and the false siren song of the just. Who, after all, could possibly argue in favor of the evils of liquor, or the brutish habits of the undomesticated, soused-up men who imbibe, or the continued sufferings of the fairer sex proceeding and precipitating therefrom? But oh my darlings, our 3 heroines, they knew those Foyer gals, for all their high-minded jawing and pontificating, was up to no good. And they intended to root out that evil and shine the light of truth on it before it might find a foothold in our peaceful, sleepy little town. And what happened next? Oh, we shall see.
this one area where women have power over men, where women are more valuable than men, right? Men have to give up everything else. They have to give up everything else in order. They're like what?
I just want to shape what you're saying a little bit, just to because you're right. I just want to. I mean, you're right. I agree with like 75, the usual 75% of what I agree with with you. But it's the ultimate privilege.
Yes,
to be able to reproduce.
The ultimate privilege, because reproducing is the ultimate freaking end game.
Yes, so evolutionarily, it's the ultimate privilege to be able to reproduce. And in this instance, it's a secondary ultimate privilege to be able to command the desirable traits that you want in the opposite gender, which both women have. They are not just able to reproduce. They're in a situation where, because they have this sexual value, it's almost guaranteed that they will reproduce, which is the ultimate privilege, period. There is no greater privilege. And they also get to command that their mates appeal to them in a way that men cannot. And I know feminists would come back with a female beauty ideal, but that doesn't even come into play, because, and here is why. Just let me lay out this argument. When you look at people who get married, the people who get married, pair off, generally are of the same level of attractiveness. The man and the woman are about as attractive as each other. When you look at hookup culture, it is almost invariably more attractive men having sex with less attractive women. Because when women go out into hookup culture, they demand that men be more attractive than themselves. So, no, there is no fucking pressure. Like, there is no functional attractiveness pressure, selective pressure being applied on men, by men on women. Because if there were, then women would be more attractive than their partners, except in instances where they're going to, get significant financial benefit. And men would be expecting to have sex with better, more attractive women during hookups. See, there has to be some functional situation where this actually applies, where men are actually getting more attractive women. But the selection pressure that they can bring to bear on women is not sufficient to make that so. So they end up having sex, casual one-night stands with women who are less attractive, and they end up marrying a woman who is as attractive. So no, there's no functional selective pressure being brought by men on women in terms of attractiveness.
Well,
and you can see
sex, in terms of sex and
the pair bonding. There's no functional. There's nothing going. That's not happening. It's in a functional sense. It's not happening. So you can't appeal to that to say that men put selective pressure on women. It's only at this point in time, and you and me can totally get into it, Hannah or Karen, how much is socialization versus biology when it comes to selection pressure that women are applying to men, and how much is, reasonable in a pair bonding species. But right now, it's obvious that women are the ones who lead the dance, and men are the ones who conform to the expectations of women.
And what drives me crazy is feminists will claim that this particular dance, right, the dance of being able to actually get sex, right? It's disgusting that men are just he's just complaining that he can't get sex, and that's just like entitlement and blah blah blah, and it's horrible and blah blah blah, because nobody's entitled to sex and all of this shit, right? Okay, and it's disgusting and horrible and gross that anybody should feel deprived because they are unable to get sex, to get sex, right? But at the same time, sex is the most valuable thing, because what's the crime to end all crimes in feminist eyes?
Rape.
The hijacking of a woman's sexuality.
Which sort of leads into something that I was going to point out, and that is that while feminists claim it's patriarchy that causes the female gatekeeper, male seeker roles. It's for sexual relationships. It's just the opposite. It's feminism now that is driving those roles, because everything feminists advocate with respect to how sexual relationships should be pursued relies on presuming women gatekeepers and presuming men pursuers of a valuable commodity. That basically your cunt is the most valuable thing you have, and you're to use that to manipulate men. And regardless of what feminists say about gender roles, what they do in relation to gender roles demonstrates their actual intent. And it's just like, you say in any other situation, words are meaningless, actions mean everything. Feminists have fought for legislation to support the female gatekeeper role. They have fought to change research so that it supports the female gatekeeper role. They have been using definitions since Koss stepped into feminist research that specifically exclude men who have been raped by women from the definition of rape. That is the female gatekeeper role put into research that is used not only to inform law and policy in the United States, but all over the world. The United Nations is using Mary Koss's definition for rape in research that they do on sexual violence in every country that they research this in. So feminism is all about enforcing those gender roles. They have no business claiming to be opposing them. And it's the bit about the engagement ring is another example. Here this writer is bitching about patriarchal gender roles, and she brings up engagement rings, and she never bothers to point out this is a situation where a man has to spend 2 months' salary according to social norms just to buy the right to ask a woman if he can support her for the rest of his life. Now, how much more enforcement of gender roles do you need? And at no point has she criticized this in her article. She never said, that's not really fair to men. She never said anything about how that's treating women as being far more valuable than a man. Nope, not a word. And as a feminist, it kind of shows that she not only approves the gatekeeper role, but revels in it. There is no patriarchy. Belief in patriarchy is based on circular reasoning. We always get told by feminists 2 sets of proof for patriarchy. One of them is that bad things happen to women, and the other one is that women are less prevalent in positions of authoritative responsibility, which they call power, like civil service, CEO positions, and business ownership. Problem is, bad things happen to men too, and women's prevalence in those positions is mainly due to women's choices, not dominance by men. And when confronted with those facts, feminist response is, it's gendered when it happens to women because patriarchy, and women's choices aren't really their own because patriarchy. So in one single step, they've resorted to citing patriarchy as proof of itself. That doesn't work. So there is no patriarchy. There is literally nothing for them to base their claims on. But there are gender roles, and they are imbalanced. And feminists are full of shit when they blame those on men. Women are the drivers of those roles, and feminists are the exploiters of them, and the ones privileged by them.
This is the interpretation of the conversation that she's having with these guys. And he's saying, how am I supposed to find an ambitious and independent, self-reliant woman? How can I find a woman who doesn't need me to save her? And she's saying, you need to give up your male privilege and fight the patriarchy that's preventing women from being able to save themselves. And he's saying, so I need to save a woman in order to have a woman who doesn't need to be saved. And she's like, yes, it makes perfect sense. And she doesn't know why these guys are getting so fucking frustrated.
Oh my God. And one of the things that drives me crazy about this, and it's the same thing that I was talking about before with there is no freaking family court in the world that will force a woman to take sole custody of her kids when she would rather share it with the father, right? Okay, this is entirely the result of what women want. Okay, if women want to be independent, if women want to be self-determining, if women want to be self-sufficient, maybe 150 years ago that was not as easy to do. right? It was possible. It was possible to do it. It was more difficult, but it was possible. Now it is the easiest fucking thing on the fucking planet to be independent, financially self-sufficient, self-determining, autonomous. You can embrace all of those things as a woman. In fact, you can embrace them more readily than you can as a man. You can have all of that, right? You can literally say, I don't need no man, and it can actually be a thing. You can reproduce without needing any man. Go to a fucking sperm bank, right? You can do that as a woman, right? All of these things are achievable as a woman. You can do that.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing stopping you. There is nothing stopping women from being that.
Yeah, it's yet another reason why it's impossible to rationally believe feminist promulgation on patriarchy, because they sit there and they tell you over and over again that women are equal to men in every way, and the only thing keeping women from reaching their full potential is male domination. But if women were truly equal to men in every way, men as a society would not be able to dominate all of female society, or even the majority, or even more than the bottom rung minority. Because if we were equal in every way, there would be no weakness to dominate that wouldn't also exist in men.
Don't allow women to apply the terms patriarchy and male privilege to force you to take responsibility for things you do not have responsibility for. And one of those things is female selective pressure. And I want to say to these guys who are upset that they aren't able to get a woman who embodies the qualities that they want. And I can see this. I can see the frustration of these men. Because what they want is a woman who takes responsibility. And what they get is Miss Benson, a woman child who needs a bunch of unscientific buzzwords so that she can protect herself from the idea of adulthood. I mean, what is the big fucking deal, Miss Benson? So what? You did so. Women are not pure as driven snow. We make mistakes. We have completely ridiculous expectations of men.
And we have our own agenda. We have an agenda.
Yeah, we are not necessarily, the best people. We're just, we are just as bad as men, and then we're also facilitated in some ways of being worse. And you don't need to constantly be abdicating your agency in this issue. That is actually more toxic.
In fact, that takes, like, where we can say women can be just as bad as men and sometimes worse in many situations. That abdication of agency means that women cannot be just as good as men, not as long as women are doing that. You can only become as good as men when you cease abdicating your agency, and then you have a chance.
So you're essentially saying feminism is the desire for women to be treated like children. No, because children don't have autonomy. Children aren't self-determining. Children live under the authority of their parents. Children are not afforded the rights of adults. Feminism is the insistence, not the desire, not the request, but the insistence and the demand that children retain the rights and the privileges and the protections of children while having all of the freedoms and rights and privileges of adults.
Feminist love will save men too. By Gendella Benson. I hate how women think they are doing me a favor by having sex with me, he began. What about me? My intimacy is just as valuable. Aside from the bitter edge in his tone, I understood what he meant. I wanted to laugh and tell him that this was one of many reasons why he needed feminism. I wanted to tell him that it was patriarchy that told women that sex was some kind of trophy, a bargaining chip to manipulate men through their uncontrollable desire and need to penetrate. But I knew how he felt about feminism, and I didn't have the mental energy to get into the back and forth, and so I left it. I hear or see complaints made by men about the nature of relationships and the sexual dynamic they find themselves in. And so often, I want to tell them that females aren't the problem. It's patriarchy. But 9 out of 10 times, the man complaining is so heavily invested in the oppressive imbalance of patriarchy in other ways that I don't really think they deserve an answer at all, if they'd even be open to it. Because generally, women bear the brunt of patriarchy. New feminist visions of love often focus on liberation for women from the sexism that throttles heterosexual relationships, but patriarchy, by its hierarchical nature, oppresses us all to some degree. And women could also be complicit in this, as they buy into the restrictive ideals that patriarchy embodies, and project those ideals onto their partners, defining appropriate and inappropriate forms of masculinity by the ficklest terms. Men may reap certain privileges from the gender imbalance, but it doesn't mean they are exempt from narrow paths of acceptance, and this toxic culture has rules about everything. There are expectations about how real men handle heartbreak. You get over it and stick your penis into the next willing woman. The appropriate noises to make during sex. No moans of ecstasy, please. And generally expressive emotion of any kind is frowned upon. Don't be too eager, avoid too much affection, and don't you dare cry. Patriarchy even robs men of the simple joys of home life when it tells them that the home is the woman's domain, nurturing children is a female concern, and the steadying comfort that can be found in a long-term relationship is a prison that needs to be avoided for as long as possible. Feminism has long been accused of trying to destroy the family, but the burden of men as the overall provider keeps them out of the house, working long and desperate hours, physically and emotionally disconnected from their partners and children. There are still many men who believe that they are only as useful as the balance of their bank accounts, and for those who dare to buck restricted gender roles, they may face the scorn of their peers and accusation of emasculation. Perhaps circular discussions on social media about who should pay on a date, how much engagement rings should cost, or whether women should or should not propose are silent cries for help. Perhaps these are the first attempts at grappling with sexist socialization that limits the possibility of mutually satisfying relationships. It's a possibility, but since most of these discussions are derailed and never seem to break any new ground, I'm completely disengaged.
Isn't it?
However, it is clear, when I talk to men I know on an individual level, that they want to be in relationships with women who are ambitious, confident, self-reliant, and not ashamed of their bodies or their sexuality. The real question is whether the same men who want an empowered and liberated woman are willing to give up their own male privilege in order to facilitate that liberation. While equality is not a zero-sum game, misogyny and sexism cannot exist alongside the belief that women are actual people with intelligence, agency, and deserving of respect simply for the fact that they are sentient human beings. Furthermore, the privileges afforded by the patriarchy come with their own terms, conditions, and potentially toxic consequences that we see explode time and again in male violence towards women and children, as well as other men. It can be hard to imagine love and romance outside sexist rules of engagement when that is all you've ever known, but so many of us are dissatisfied with where things are at the moment. I can't think of any logical reason to hold on to things as they are. New feminist visions of love not only allow for the empowerment of women, but also create space to unshackle men from the confines of shallow masculinity. Not only is feminism for everyone, but feminist relationships can be liberating for all.
Next is Fireside Chat number 48, where we bring on the father of the men's rights movement, Warren Farrell, to ask the question, how do we bring this conversation of men's rights and men's issues to the normies?
When talking about a boy, the mom suddenly, her heart opens, her eyes dilate differently, her hands uncross, and she is really just receptive. And so biologically speaking, the most important thing that one needs to know if you're going to speak about boys and men's issues, if you're going to speak about men's issues, understand that you are violating the biological instinct to protect women, and the biological instinct for men to be a protector. When a person you want to protect you starts complaining, what you hear as an adult female is whining. And women fall in love with alpha men, not whining men. So so if you know, as Truman says, as Harry Truman said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And so this is a big one. If you are coming in tension with a biological instinct, you've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to know how to do it. And so this is one of the reasons I enjoy this work, is because I feel like I love the challenge of trying to communicate about these issues. When I was talking about women's issues, I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City for a number of years, as I think mentioned in the intro. There was, when I spoke about women's issues, women applauded, and I got standing ovations, and I got 3 or 4 invitations to come back to speak again at different places after each presentation. But as soon as I started understanding what was happening with men by talking about what was coming up in the men's groups that I was forming, the response was extremely different. So the easiest way to talk about men's issues is going to boys' issues, where women's heart opens up rather than closes down. So that's the number one thing to understand.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I mean, women have sons, and
Yes.
that's the part of them that you're tapping into.
The one word framework here is let women know your feelings of vulnerability. So women like it when guys open up and express their feelings. However, they only feel good about that when it's Superman that cries, not somebody who is weaker. When Clark Kent cries, the woman is turned off. But when Superman cries, she's okay with that. She wants vulnerability within a framework of strength. So first, you sort of share things about that you're doing. Like in my case, I'll talk about my period of time speaking only on behalf of women's issues, and so women see that as strength. This is the type of man they want to see. And then I explain something about how, and this is all accurate, how difficult it was for me to speak up about men's issues more after I found out that I lost my standing ovations by doing that. And so when I lost additional speaking engagements by doing that. So when I say that and share that, then women's response is, oh, this took some courage. Okay, if other people turned off and when he spoke about these issues, maybe I'll be different and I'll hear him better than other people did. And so whenever we tell a personal story, we share our vulnerabilities, but we're also seen as somebody that basically supports women, and we frame it in terms of how understanding boys and men will help women. Then this is really this moves us in the right direction. The process that you just use of saying what I just heard you say is the very key to the process of every bit of communication that one should do with anybody that one talks to. So the first job of anyone that wants to share, especially if you move to men's issues, which I don't recommend, but start with boys' issues. But let's say you move into men's issues because something comes up in the context of conversation that leads you to that. Then your first job is not to talk. Your first job is to listen. And because of the biological instinct to not be able to hear men complaining, this need to listen first is more important than it would be than if you were talking about any other issue. If you're talking about race, standing up for a minority makes you seem good. If you're talking about race and you put down or you make something critical about a minority and you say a minority should take responsibility in some way or whatever, then it makes you seem like a racist. So when you're talking about men, anything that you say that is a support of men, it will only be heard if the person who you're talking to feels heard first. So your first job is to sort of, when an issue comes up, is to say, how do you feel about that issue? And let's say it's fathers being involved with children, and the mother might say, the woman that you're speaking to might say, "Oh God, I've seen a number of deadbeat dads, and dads. I don't know why they run away from the children. They're not very responsible, and they often lie, and so all they want is sex, and then they want to get out of the scene." And so you let her know that what you hear that her say. Her to say was, just the same type of thing you did with me a moment ago, Allison. What I heard you say was that, and then you repeat some version of that, and then you ask, is there anything I distorted about that? And you give her an opportunity, or him an opportunity, to say what she or he feels that you distorted. And instead of saying, oh no, I said that, or that's the way I said it, if the person you're listening to feels that you've distorted anything, your job is to keep working at it until you get an answer from them that says, no, you didn't distort anything. And then your next job is to ask them, is there anything else that you want to add? And so you give them an opportunity not to have to force themselves to get everything that they were thinking about into one sort of rollout, but you give them an opportunity to add more if they want to. And if they do add more, you then say, what I heard you say there was, and then is there anything I distorted about that? And then it's your time to do some speaking. But you've modeled for the person who is listening to you. You've done a number of things. You've modeled for them what you'd like them to do with and for you, and you've relaxed them. They know that they're valued. They know that they're respected. They know that they'll be thought of in a way that that they know that whatever they have to say will soon be heard. So they can not interrupt you, because they know that you're the type of person who's going to hear them out when it's time for them to speak again. And so, and then if they do interrupt you, just say, let me just finish, please. And the second time around, say, can I, I tried to sort of share with you everything I thought you said. Could you do that for me in a polite and respectful way? And that really sets the tone. And that tone is really important no matter where you are. In other words, if this is happening when you're at a dinner table and kids are listening, they're going to pick up far more value from that process being on target, like you just modeled a minute ago, Allison, than they will from the content, because that process is what will carry. I mean, could you imagine if all Trump voters and all Clinton voters listened to each other with that type of respect? We'd be in a world that was, or Palestinians and Israelis, or employers and employees, or parents and children listen to each other with that type of respect. If then our total world would be very different. For our listening audience, Allison and Brian, I think what would be really helpful is you and I have a chance to speak to audiences, but the average person is mostly going to be dealing with family, and sort of talking about this at Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or whatever, when the family gets together. And one person will be a liberal, another person will be a conservative, one person will have just come back from graduate school where she or he has majored in women's studies, usually a she, and and somebody else will be a Trump supporter. And so everything you say at that dinner table really has to be, you're sort of beginning to fear responses that are negative no matter what you say, being interrupted no matter who you are, and with the larger framework of understanding that a prophet is never a prophet close to home. And so you're always going to be less respected in your family than you will be in a audience where somebody is paying you to speak. At least they've invited you to respect you at the start. And so I think that knowing how to the type of technique that our approach that I was just talking about is especially helpful for people that you sense or know have different perspectives in the world than you do on the political spectrum and on the political correctness spectrum, and especially if you're talking about things like date rape or sexual harassment or domestic violence or abortion. In those four areas, the emotional levels are extremely high. And so the parameters of listening first and showing respect for different perspectives, and hearing each person's story, and even establishing that as, as what, one of the things that you care most about is that we all are able to hear each other no matter what our different perspectives are. And when people say never talk about sex or politics, I say no. Talk about sex, talk about politics, learn from each other, but listen to each other. Don't talk to somebody, because the real job of family is to learn from them. Family often puts us together with other people that we would not normally associate with if they weren't family. The gift of that is the possibility of learning from everybody who you wouldn't normally associate with, as we tend to be attracted more to the people that we agree with. Usually when you're in a family mode, if the family is larger, like at a holiday type of thing, or you have a moment or so where people are saying, so how have you been, Brian? And so you use that opportunity to sort of say, yeah, I've been really great. I've been a little bit sad about, John, who's going through a paternity suit, and that's really been kind of sad for me. I've been trying to work with him, but he's really been stressed out. And so then other people are okay about saying, well, how has he been stressed out? And then you tell Joe's story. And then no matter what side of the issue people are on, they're sort of hearing more Joe's story. And there's not a good intellectual argument against somebody who's suffering emotionally. And that is and you can't bring it up sort of like just as proof of, it's more potent to bring it up as something that's affecting you than it is to bring it up as, on the issue of paternity leave, or on the issue of paternity fraud, or on the issue of divorce. I want to tell you guys this: if you're bringing it up as an intellectual issue, it'll reach an emotional stop sign a lot more quickly than it will if you're bringing it up as something that's part of the experience that you have in your life that's frustrating you, or that's hamstringing you. When I'm in a debate or I'm talking to a family member and they say, well, clearly women get paid less than men do for the same work, that takes one sentence and everybody at that family table believes them. Now, for me to respond to that took me 5 years of writing an entire book, which is longer than I'm allowed at the time at the family table to explain. But there are a few things that I am able to explain at that family table that help people sort of get that it's not just a matter of men earning more for the same work. And one of those things is, that starting out with agreeing with them. It is true that male doctors get paid more than female doctors for the same work. So everybody goes, yeah, you must be on my side. And then I explain, but the difference in pay gap between male and female doctors is much smaller than it is for the average male and the average female. But because you're comparing doctors to doctors, and normally speaking, you're comparing different jobs to each other. So when you hear men earn $1 for each 79 cents that women earn for the same work, you're comparing cardiac surgeons, who are more likely to be males, to people who are working full-time, that is 35 hours a week or more, as a checkout person in a supermarket, who's more likely to be female. And so you're comparing one to the other, which is not a fair comparison. People get that. So then you go on to the next level. However, the male doctor still out earns the female doctor. And you put your fingers up and to show that the difference is not what it was, but still more than. And so you have everyone's attention because you're agreeing with their bias that men earn, that men do seem to be earning more than women, even when their title is the same. But the average male, then you explain that the average male doctor has worked longer number of years than the average female doctor. When you control for that, the gap is less. And that the average male doctor is more likely to be in his own business. The average female doctor is more likely to be in an HMO. And then if you control for own business versus own business, and the amount of time that they work, then the gap is very small. But the male doctor still earns more than the average female doctor. And then they're really intrigued. Why would that be? And you say that the average male doctor is more likely to be a cardiac surgeon or a surgeon, and the average female doctor is more likely to be a general practitioner. But when you control for surgeon versus surgeon, equal number of years worked, and equal number of amount of degrees, and both working for themselves or an HMO, then you have the women earning slightly more than the men. Then the question becomes different. Why are the women earning more than men? And then you have a relaxation period of time where you can explain why women who are full-time in the workplace, where all the controls are in place, actually earn slightly more than men. And that was the research I had to do for why men earn more. But those couple of examples and doing your homework about the research just allow you to do that within the framework of keeping your family both interested, fascinated, and either, at least open to hearing it.
There's a huge industry now of anti-feminism on YouTube, like gigantic YouTubers who specifically are anti-feminist, much bigger than us. And what they'll do is they'll say to those anti-feminists, "Oh, you're just men's rights activists," and then they'll turn around and say to us, like the people who sort of oppose us ideologically, they'll turn around and say to us, "Oh, you're just anti-feminists." And it's like, well, so they're trying to use both to silence both sides, and it's just really interesting. And what's happening is that the terms are losing their potency. So even if you're a person who are like, you know what, I want to keep the words white nationalists or Stormfront or Ku Klux Klan, I want to keep them actually referring to people who engage in these activities and keep that stigmatized, please stop using the stigma related to these terms to apply to everybody you don't agree with, because that will make it so that nobody cares anymore.
Absolutely.
About these terms. And that's what's really happening in media, is that they're using these terms so blanket that they're losing all of their meaning.
Yeah.
And there's now a sort of a counterculture happening, it's getting larger and larger, that uses the ironic use of these terms and makes fun of it, basically. So, I mean, if you ever actually look at our chat, you will see a whole bunch of people who are calling or saying, yeah, I'm a white nationalist, I'm a racist, I'm all of these things, and they're saying it ironically, because they have the media has so diluted the terms and applied them in so many ways. And I wonder if that's eventually going to happen to men's rights advocate or activists too, because they just throw it around in everything. And at some point, the stigma goes away, because they're basically calling everybody they disagree with these horrible names, and nobody cares anymore because they've used it too many times and in too many contexts. And essentially, all they're using it for is a way to shut people up that they don't agree with. And I just wanted to point out, because there's some interesting stuff happening with labeling and names and groups of people actually using all of these negative terms ironically, because they're tired of having it thrown at them as not as an accurate statement of what they believe, but as a way of shutting them up, essentially.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, last night we had an after show chat on a very large YouTuber called PewDiePie.
He's the biggest one.
Yeah, he's the biggest YouTuber on YouTube, labeled anti-Semitic for no reason whatsoever, none. Just because people did not like him and they don't like his influence. Yeah. So it's a lot of these negative terms. The internet culture is sort of shifting with and taking away, I think, the power of these negative terms. If there was anything that really spurred me towards being really uncomfortable with feminism, it was that. It was that sort of it was a really icky feeling. Like, it was like when, for example, to use an example, I would I write science fiction, and sometimes I write fight scenes, and I would want to talk to a guy, or I knew a man who had experience with martial arts, and I said to him, okay, I'm writing this fight scene, so I'd like to talk to you about how it would play out and how to choreograph it. Instead of listening to what I said, he reframed it as me being a victim of an attack by some sort of assailant coming from behind me in an alleyway. And I'm like, I'm not interested in in talking about this in terms of self-defense as a victim. I'm interested in talking about this as an author of a, but there was no talking to this guy. So he reframes it all as me being a victim. And that process just felt disgusting.
Yes.
Like it was really in, and so he's taking away why I even asked him the question in the first place and reframing it in such a way that he can be the hero of this new scenario that he's put me into. And I felt this continuously with feminist men.
Yeah.
I would come up to them and discuss a particular topic, and then they would go and they'd take that topic, erase every part of what I was talking about that came from a position where I wasn't a victim.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this because I want to write a story. No, you're talking about it because you're secretly wanting self-defense information because you're a potential victim of men. And they would they take away all of my personal choice and why I brought up, reframe it as me being the victim of something, and then paint themselves as a hero. Right. And it was just that entire thing. If I'm really honest, it was that gave me the mental energy and the emotional energy to just question all of it. And I get incredible satisfaction. And this is just me personally. I get incredible satisfaction from being able to say, but to these men, look at the situation for men. You don't get to paint me as a victim. I'm not going to be your damsel in your narrative because of this.
Yes.
And that actually gives me great, like on a personal level, I care about men, but it also gives me satisfaction to just stick it back at these guys.
And it's ironic that feminists have honed victimhood as a fine art, when in fact the ideal, the initiative, the initial aspect of feminism was to make women not to be victims, was to be more in the framework of what you were talking about, of being your own hero. And so feminism has had to try to have it both ways, of making women, applauding women for being strong and being their own person. And that part of feminism I always have and always will support, because I want my own daughters to be strong and independent. And at the same time, feminism, women as victims whenever they wish to be that. And so this is an enormous amount of having it, having your cake and eating it too. And so this clearly must be challenged.
I think the more people talk about it, the more I think that this conversation can evolve and grow, and maybe we can get to the bottom of lots of important questions. I actually am at the point now where I think the relations between men and women is actually probably the most important conversation we can have as human beings. I think it's above politics. I think it's above the affairs of education and the good global geo relations and culture and all that. I think that it just seems always to come back to men and women and what we relate to. I think so anyway. Finally, we have Dick and Cherry show number 1, where Richard and Anna Cherry discuss evolutionary game theory, tit for tat, and more.
For those not familiar with the concept, game theory is a theoretical exercise, a proposition of a situation where there's two players and one benefits and loses and the other one benefits and loses, or they both benefit or both lose depending on how they interact with each other. So it's entirely based on predicting what the other person will do, and it's usually defect or stay with you. It's kind of like be loyal or go against you. So it's the basis of cooperation or competition.
So like the prisoner's dilemma?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's a prime example of game theory. And where we see the movie Beautiful Mind, it's actually about a real person, Nash, and he really went into this game theory and looked at it and said, well, once you have an individual interaction and it's the only one you ever have with this particular person, you should always defect. You should always be selfish. You should always take most for yourself because everyone else will be doing that. So when you're trying to predict others' behavior, that's the thing about game theory. Not only do you need to know like what's good for you, but you also are predicting the other person because it is fundamental in interaction of two. So you need to know what the other one will be doing or predict what the other one is likely to do. And based on what they're doing, your outcome changes. You either gain or lose based on what the other person does. So you need to not only guess for yourself right, but guess what they're going to do right. And they found that Nash was like, well, you know what, just take for yourself, because everyone will take for themselves. And it's just a better outcome if you do that. And that's kind of what The Beautiful Mind goes into, the movie. However, we noticed as we were studying this idea more that we, as humanities science, we noticed that it is a one-shot theory, meaning you interact with that person, that anonymous individual once, and then you go your separate ways and you never see each other again. And it's a very limited one-step sort of interaction. However, that's not real life per se. We have, complex interactions, and people don't just go away. Consequences, remain. And so there needs to be another way of looking at game theory. And so evolutionary game theory came about. And it is an idea of how do groups react with each other? How do they cooperate? How do they compete? How do they do things in order to maximize outcome for each individual and each group? And they actually did a strategy competition. It was a man called Robert Axelrod who did a sort of a strategy submission for anyone who thought they had the best, sort of competing strategy, needed to submit it. And there was one that ended up winning all the mathematical models that they put it through, and it was called Tit for Tat with Forgiveness.
Let me go ahead and give the classical. Okay, so there's basically a classical point at which all the older type of game theory always just kind of fails, and that is in dealing with any kind of groups. The groups themselves would fail, even though the individuals might flourish. Groups would no longer be able to work, and so basically what we have is that grouped competition is a thing that that exists in nature, and for very good reason. And so the prime example that's usually given is a few different ones, but the one that I like is that there is a group of people who live at kind of like an oasis. They're far away from any kind of other resources, and they have one well. This well has gotten kind of low. Now, all of them, they all raise vegetables, and they all, sell vegetables to each other, and each of them sells different kinds of vegetables. So there's kind of a, what's the word for it when you benefit from, damn it, I can't remember the word for it, but there's a word for it when you benefit because you're raising one kind and they're raising one kind, and so you have more than you need, and you trade, and you end up with, each of you ends up with more in general because of the different kinds of things that you're raising. So that's how their society. No, there's a word for it that's you may have never heard. So anyhow, so so each of them benefits from watering their crops. Now, based upon, if they were to act based upon, what is defined by Nash equilibrium as, the stable strategy that will best, make sure to give you a competitive advantage. Each of them has a level of competition with each other, of course, because that's just how societies work, and so. What happens is there's a drought, and now what they've been able to calculate for certain that the water in the well will be able to last through the drought if they don't water their plants. Everybody will live. However, if a bunch of people water their plants, the entire community will die. But the thing is that what ends up happening is that they believe that some people will cheat, and so therefore to maintain your competitive advantage, the appropriate thing that the old game theory ideology prescribes that you should do is that you should also attempt to cheat and try to water your plants, and therefore the end result, of course, is that the community dies. And so that is the problem that we started to see. It's like, okay, if we act upon this older idea of economics, etc., it's a simplified idea that doesn't work in any kind of large scale. And so the problem that is solved through evolutionary game theory is this is one of those problems where there's a variety of instances of this where basically the system fails and it kills everybody, or it always, whereas there's a short-term benefit for the predators, they end up dying as well. And so it's basically about maintenance of a larger system that is larger than the individuals, and so that predators still have prey, and prey can still properly reproduce it, etc. So that's basically where this is going, and that's why that we initially identified that there were problems with our first ideas of game theory.
So I mentioned he was going to explain that, where you kind of also went into that, Richard Rell, earlier, where you had the explanation of how you have sheep and wolves, but then whenever you have a big population of sheep, so let's say a big population of producers who cannot defend themselves, then you have predators coming in, and then they eat all the producers and populate. So there's a bunch of predators, and you're like, oh, wow, look at that Harrington spike, look at that growth, that's great. Except then there's no producers left for you to take from. So then the predators die. So
you have a year 2000 tech bubble.
Right.
Sorry, I just had to get.
We keep seeing situations like this. Actually, not just the tech bubble, but then the housing crash, and then soon the auto loan crash. I mean, this just keeps happening as a strategy that they try to do in Wall Street. They try to exploit this, game theory.
But it was specifically in 2000. What it was is there was tons of people who were trying to make money off of the very few people who were actually producing real programs that worked and stuff. So it was just it was funny.
I'd imagine what happens with tit for tat for forgiveness is that someone defects, and then they forgive them once, and then after that one forgiveness, they will punish them. So.
Yes.
Right. And so it's a little more complex version of keeping up with how much the other is defecting versus how much they are cooperating. And then, and so it's like being forgiving until you can see that they are generally just trying to take advantage of you.
Right.
And then say, fuck you.
There it is. That's exactly it. They will forgive a single transgression, but a double transgression gets titted.
Yes. Yeah.
And then go back.
The benefit of that is it allows actually a interaction where you determine trust with the person, the counterpart that you're playing with, because they can, if you're creating a dialogue, essentially, if they reject or if they defect, and they want to see what you do, and if you forgive them once and then don't forgive them a second time, they can see that you're forgiving, but you're not a pushover. So you start to establish a kind of a personality, which allows a deeper sense of trust. I think might be why this one is the most successful.
Right, it's reliably cooperative. Tit for tat.
Reliably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just comes down to basically what's a better system. It's funny how much people who were initially against the idea of altruism, being something that is valuable, because they kind of saw that we're just talking about what's the best system here, and then when it comes down to it, you end up finding out, what the best system is actually kind of this system of altruism, etc. It's a necessity. It's just the way it works mechanically. There's no emotional anything having to do with it. Has nothing to do with morality. Has nothing to do with anything. I mean, it does. It has a tremendous amount to do with morality, because it's the basis of morality, but it comes down to it's just the best solution for a particular problem.
Yeah, well, there's another aspect to it as well, which I think maybe is where we come into the complexities of altruism, because there's other studies that show that a group can lose its altruistic qualities if people who fail to abide by those moral standards aren't punished. So there's an element where you have to punish people who do not abide by the standards of your group, or it essentially descends into chaos,
basically it's the strategy changes, and that's I think that people should watch that whole video, because that's kind of what they're talking about is if you there are definitely strategy changes. Once it is more advantageous to become an exploiter, then everybody becomes an exploiter. And so if you are not punishing the exploitation, then you are making that strategy be the superior strategy. Therefore, people will switch to that strategy because it's simply superior. If you have a person where in one case they're okay, somebody's making someone tea or coffee, and there's one thing that is labeled poison and the other thing that is labeled sugar. And when they put sugar into your coffee, but it actually turns out to be poison, and it was labeled sugar, so therefore it was an accident. Some people, that's one situation where it's an accidental poisoning, and then in another situation, they think that it's poison, but instead they put sugar into your coffee, and so they try to poison you and are unsuccessful in doing so. You can use what's it called? Shit. Basically, it's a stimulation from the magnetic stimulation from the
MRI.
Yeah, that's an MRI is a
magnetic resonance imagery.
Imaging, right? So it's similar, but you can basically change the blood flow in the area so that the area of the brain doesn't activate the same.
It doesn't image anything; it just stimulates it.
Right. It's either stimulates it or actually how it works is it overstimulates it. And so there's a period of time where you're when something's been overstimulated, it won't activate again. So basically what happens is you can change a person from the punishment where they believe their belief in how much punishment should go to a person who it's where they either have a morality that is no harm, no foul, where basically it's like, well, the fact that they didn't that they tried to poison you is irrelevant. They didn't actually poison you. So the person who did actually poison you deserves more punishment. That's one case. And then you can actually flip even the same individual with similar situations, and their opinion instead will be, well, the person who had an accident, well, it's an accident. There's nothing they could have done about that. And so that's they don't really deserve nearly as much punishment as the fucker who tried to punish you and just was incompetent at it. And so there's two. It's a very like bifurcated type of morality that you can turn on and off with from the outside with the
no harm, no foul, or it's the intent that matters.
When we're dealing with a tit for tat being with forgiveness situation, people with a theory of mind can start to prioritize cooperation as a personal value over even retributive or personal material benefit. When you're starting to get into theory of mind, and the reason why is because of that chemical response to our understanding of other people's mental states. And to use a very simple example, when you display pictures of women to men do not have I believe it's a dopamine. It might be an oxytocin or vasopressin or dopamine, essentially a pleasure hormone response, unless the picture of a woman, and usually it has to be an attractive woman, is looking at them directly in the picture. If she's looking away, they don't get that shot of pleasurable brain hormones. And the reason why is because what they're really responding to is their presumed mental state of the woman. Not her physical attributes, not the potential of reproductive success, not any of that. Well, that in addition, but the crucial factor is that she's presenting an illustration of a mental state that indicates desire. So we actually respond chemically to our understanding of other people's mental states, which introduces a whole other level of group sociality to game theory. And so that's what's really important.
Yeah,
about
it is that our brains, and over time, developing to try to appropriately mimic what game theory is modeling in a more basic way. Basically, our brains are built on top of this simple system of game theory that we're talking about, which it's far more complex already than it was in the past. But our brains are designed in a far more complex version of that, with the ability to estimate other people's ideologies and all those things are kind of happening under the surface, like you pointed out there. It's not that this is something that somebody is thinking consciously. It's that there's literally just a reaction that you have that is on an unconscious level to whether or not they're looking at you. And so it's so you're talking about that there are systems based upon more basic systems that are very complex in nature in determining, okay, if a woman is looking directly at you, that this is indicating that they are more likely to be interested in you as a breeding partner, and so you're getting that dopamine and all of the different
It's an illustration of desire. So she's illustrating a particular mental state. And that is what the man's brain is responding to. And to bring it back to game theory and altruism and tit for tat and forgiveness, not only can we be dealing with these situations in terms of material benefit, we can also be dealing with it because our brains give us rewards for certain pro-social behavior. And that makes it so much more interesting and complex. And like you were saying, it layers on top of the basic mathematical models.
We hope you enjoyed this clip show. If there was a clip from these shows you think we should have shown, please leave a comment on the video and include a timestamp. Thank you, and Badger on.